Com a nossa equipe, nós conseguimos fazer um passeio, integrando o João a toda a equipe e visitando todos os lugares.
Veio grudando.
Em um mundo em que as mudanças são cada vez mais rápidas e tantas vezes inesperadas, nosso desafio como educadores só aumenta. Há um ano, o Educa desenvolveu o curso O Professor na Era Digital. Desde então, o projeto já está presente em mais de 50 escolas de todo o país. Agora é o momento de dar um novo salto para realmente engajar esta geração de nativos digitais. Por isso, o Educa apresenta uma nova versão do curso, oferecendo 12 certificações para o ensino híbrido. Com estas certificações, o professor desenvolve as competências necessárias para atuar com uma diferenciada geração. Em cada certificação, o professor recebe mentoria individualizada e pode cursar as certificações na quantidade e na ordem que desejar. Participando de todas, recebe ainda uma certificação extra. O que você está esperando para entrar no século XXI? Invista em seu desenvolvimento. Um novo salto de qualidade para você e sua escola começa com o ensino híbrido. Aproveite nossos valores promocionais. Seja um professor na era digital. Saiba mais em www.iteduc.tech.
Chegou o mais novo lançamento da Matific que vai revolucionar as aulas de matemática na sua escola. Na Matific, os alunos terão uma experiência de aprendizagem imersiva baseada em jogos, para explorar novos conceitos matemáticos, praticar habilidades e se divertir. A Matific é uma solução totalmente adaptável e personalizável, se ajustando automaticamente às necessidades individuais de cada aluno.
Para ajudar o educador, nossos jogos desenvolvidos por especialistas estão alinhados à BNCC e os principais livros didáticos. E você, professor, ganha tempo para planejar as suas aulas e acompanhar o progresso dos seus alunos. Além disso, trouxemos uma ferramenta poderosa de avaliação diagnóstica para ajudar a determinar o nível de habilidade de cada aluno.
A visão da Matific é proporcionar a cada criança, em cada canto do mundo, uma experiência matemática da mais alta qualidade possível. Aqui no Brasil, são mais de 2 milhões de alunos e 5 mil escolas. Uma história construída com resultados comprovados que só uma plataforma premiada pode entregar. Vem construir o futuro com a gente.
É uma plataforma de aprendizado para escolas e universidades que fornece todas as ferramentas essenciais para criar e gerenciar atividades didáticas. Com um design intuitivo, Neo transforma o aprendizado em uma experiência agradável para os alunos e permite que os professores ampliem suas atividades além das paredes da sala de aula. Os educadores podem criar aulas atraentes e adequadas ao seu estilo de ensino sem nenhum conhecimento técnico, incluir seus recursos, mídias e arquivos favoritos.
O aluno se sente muito mais seguro quando ele sabe que tem o apoio de uma pessoa que tem um vínculo afetivo com ele, que tem um cuidado especial com ele.
Para aprender, é também preciso escutar.
Desde o primeiro dia do aluno no Band até o último, a gente está por perto.
Durante a pandemia, acho que todo mundo teve que se reinventar. E a escola também. A gente esteve o tempo todo presente para o aluno. A gente poder ouvir os alunos, poder compartilhar com eles, trocar experiências é fundamental.
O Band tem um cuidado com o bem-estar emocional do aluno que se estende de ponta a ponta. Então, desde a chegada até o auxílio dado pelos orientadores, pelos professores, pelos funcionários.
A escuta é um recurso fundamental. É através da escuta que eu garanto o meu lugar de fala, o meu lugar de identidade e onde eu vou me conhecendo, me encontrando e encontrando o caminho.
Estar ao lado dos alunos nesse momento da primeira decisão profissional é algo que os ajuda em todo o futuro deles.
O aluno que tem esse sonho, de estudar numa universidade fora do Brasil, é um processo de muitas incertezas, muitas ansiedades. Então, esse aluno, a gente tenta ao máximo ajudar.
Um ponto muito forte é o auxílio que é dado de aluno para aluno. Então, a gente tem grupos de alunos que são voluntários e que se formam para prestar essa ajuda, essa escuta e esse acolhimento.
É muito gratificante ver que muitas das estratégias que eles aprendem aqui dentro, eles levam para fora da escola.
O bem-estar emocional é o caminho mais seguro para o sucesso e para a felicidade.
Participar da Educa Week é expandir os horizontes e você pode ampliar ainda mais esta aprendizagem. Adquira os e-books da coleção Educa Week, que complementam os temas dos painéis. Parte da renda será destinada a bolsas do Educ para professores de escolas públicas. Entre no site do Educa Week e conheça a coleção toda. Lá você também pode garantir o seu certificado de participação. E mais uma grande novidade: a Educa Week preparou mais de 50 workshops voltados aos professores, aos gestores e para todos que se interessam por educação. Amplie horizontes e acelere sua carreira. Inscreva-se agora. Vagas limitadas. Bom, e ainda vale conhecer o espaço de troca de práticas e acompanhar o prêmio Destaque Educação, com propostas inspiradoras para suas aulas. Participe, vote! Tenha uma experiência completa na Educa Week. E-books, certificados, workshops, espaço de trocas de práticas e prêmio Destaque Educação. Você ajudando a transformar a educação no Brasil.
Eu acredito na educação como forma de ampliação de oportunidades. Se eu não acreditar na educação, eu paro de sonhar. E sonhar move, sonhar impulsiona, vitaliza, faz acontecer. Sonhar é viver.
Eu acredito na educação das humanidades, na formação do sujeito integral, aquela que forma a quem aprende e a quem ensina.
Eu acredito na educação, pois o espaço da sala de aula pode despertar o melhor que há dentro de nós.
Eu acredito no poder transformador da educação, enquanto amplia as possibilidades de acesso a esse mundo que está cada vez mais globalizado.
Eu acredito na educação porque ela é revolucionária. É ela que promove a revolução na ação, no pensamento e na capacidade de resolver problemas. A educação é, portanto, transformação. E quem transforma, transforma para melhor.
A educação tem o poder de encantar nossas crianças. Ela faz com que os desafios se tornem possibilidades e sonhos.
Eu acredito na educação porque foi ela que me permitiu quebrar o ciclo da pobreza, contrariar as estatísticas de quem cresceu na periferia de São Paulo em uma ocupação e sonhar sem limites e em busca dos seus sonhos.
A educação é o bem comum e coletivo e nos permite construir o futuro, não apenas nos preparar para ele.
Para mim, educação, antes de ser um projeto ou um processo, é um propósito de vida, onde todos possam realizar os seus potenciais. Por isso, eu acredito na educação.
Nós acreditamos na educação.
Olá pessoal, sejam bem-vindos ao painel The Best Schools in USA da Educa Week 2021. Este é um capítulo vivo da história da educação do Brasil. Reunimos mais de 150 lideranças do setor educacional para analisar e discutir a educação brasileira pós-pandemia. Você acompanha a Educa Week através do YouTube e em breve nos principais streamings de podcasts. A Educa Week é um oferecimento da SG Student Travel, provedora de experiências educacionais, Matific, plataforma de aprendizagem matemática, Educational Leaders, grupo de líderes educacionais do Brasil, Educa, Institute of Technology and Education, a plataforma de educação digital que leva o mundo para dentro das escolas, e Árvore, a solução digital de leitura ideal para escolas públicas e privadas de todo o Brasil. E só reforçando que na página da Educa Week você adquire o seu certificado do evento e também lá você adquire os e-books complementares aos temas dos painéis e ainda se inscreve em mais de 50 workshops preparados pelos maiores profissionais do setor educacional. Para dar início ao painel The Best Schools in USA, gostaria de passar a fala para os mediadores dessa conversa, Sr. Pasi Loman, presidente da Seppo Brasil, e Carol Stancati, diretora da Red Balloon. Sejam bem-vindos.
Muito obrigado, Marcos Talarico. Obrigado pela organização deste Educa Week, que é um evento fantástico. Um grande prazer e honra participar mais uma vez da Educa Week. Muito obrigado também para ouvintes, que por vocês terem escolhido gastar o seu valioso tempo conosco. A gente agradece. Para quem não me conhece, sou professor Dr. Pasi Loman, sou da Finlândia, mas eu mudei da Finlândia já para a Inglaterra em 97, e lá, quando eu estava fazendo meu doutorado, minha vizinha era uma brasileira, essa vizinha virou namorada, virou esposa, e ela me trouxe aqui no Brasil em 2006. E aqui eu tenho trabalhado no setor educacional nos últimos 5 anos, representando vários edtechs estrangeiros que estão entrando no mercado brasileiro. Entre eles, vou destacar a Seppo, que é uma plataforma de gamificação, com a qual professores, editores e coordenadores de escolas podem criar seus próprios jogos educativos. Também represento Tiny App, que é um assistente digital para setor educação infantil. E, finalmente, Kid Science, que é um programa fantástico que ensina ciência para crianças a partir de 3 anos de idade, usando storytelling e play-based learning. E também está entrando no Brasil em parceria com Red Balloon. E é o meu grande prazer convidar outra mediadora deste painel, Carol, que vem da Red Balloon. Carol, seja muito bem-vinda.
Pasi, thank you. I should switch to English now, right?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. It's 10 o'clock at night here in Brazil today. So that's why we have to double check. Yes, after we've been working long hours. So Carol, short for Carolina. I've been working with education as an ESL teacher since I was 13 years old. I don't know how we've managed, how they allowed kids to teach kids, but that's how my story with education, my history with education started. Now I am working at Red Balloon. What we do, so Red Balloon, it's not only an ESL program, but we have classes in English, and now I'm working for schools, programs for schools. So we developed a department. We created a department to see how we can improve ESL teaching in schools and add programs such as Kids Science, and Andrea will introduce one that is also partnering with Red Balloon, so how we can spread knowledge and how we can really improve the programs in school by internationalizing their programs, so partnering with the best institutions across the globe. Pasi, I will then, guys, I think now I will invite each one of you to introduce yourselves to everyone that is listening and watching us, okay? Cristiana, I will start with you because you are right in the order, okay, of my screen here. So good evening, good morning.
Good morning and good evening. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be here. I have been in contact with Educa Week for a while, and I really admire what is done and the quality of the professionals that it brings. So I have been in education in the classroom for 30 years. In Brazil I worked at both an American school and in a Brazilian school, and I am currently now living in Florida, where I am the curriculum director for a Spanish River Christian school, which is a small private school. And so I was a biology teacher, science teacher, that's my specialty. And I got my master's and doctorate in New York at Columbia University in educational technology. So I have been working with educational technology for over 20 years. I can't believe I'm saying this, but, and as I have been working with teacher professional development, and I was the one who introduced TEAM into the curriculum at Colégio Bandeirantes. That's where I was, my last big project in Brazil. And so I'm really passionate about, the best practices in education and what that can be brought to it. So that's where my current role is in the school, is to work with the teachers to look at the curriculum and really help us move forward into bringing the best resources that we can and the best strategies and pedagogies. So that's a brief history.
Thank you, Cristiana. Thank you very much. Andrew, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, Carol. Thank you. Thank you, Cristiana. It was great to hear. So I have been an educator at a school called High Tech High in San Diego for the last 16 years. I recently just retired, and I'll get to that in a second. Over this time, we've been charged with, the the opportunity and kind of the push to experiment in education, figure out new instructional methods and practices. We've done a lot of projects, we've done a lot of experiential learning, and we've done a lot of things that really try to amp up the level of equity that we can achieve through the way that we interact with students. We've worked with a lot of kids that have ESL, and we've worked with other kids with different learning habits and styles. And so trying to develop experiences that level the playing field, give everyone an opportunity to kind of engage, give people an opportunity to see what's, related to real world practice and people doing things globally. So those have been kind of the threads that we've experimented with. After 16 years of doing this at High Tech High, we realized that there's an opportunity to branch out. And so, Mike and I, and Sarah as well, who's done a lot of work with the organization that we just started, and Brian Delgado, who's worked with Educa Week, is another colleague of ours that's helped start a nonprofit called Blue Dot Education. And our goal is to branch out from beyond kind of where we were at the school, work with other organizations, schools, and school leaders around the world to try to share what we've learned, and also to partner to keep pushing forward and see what we can achieve. And I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I had the chance to visit High Tech High, and it was kind of a life-changing experience. Once we came back, we were going over the material. It was a great opportunity. Thank you. Mike, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Mike Strong. I had the opportunity to visit High Tech High as well for 17 years.
Okay. You've managed to understand it a little bit more than I did.
A little bit more.
A little bit more.
And so I came up as an English and history teacher. I also did a lot with like art, visual and performing arts, music, and graphic design, and some other things with students. And I found project-based learning to be the best place and the best method for me to try to engage students in the world around them and in the world of people around them, which hopefully help them understand themselves as best as possible. And so I love that time. Along with my experience there, I kind of have had a trajectory in my life of seeing and hoping. I hope I still see it. I really do. I hope I see that education is the means through which we can end poverty. And that very singular goal is the goal of my life. And so I've seen a lot of other things that seem to fail us endlessly. Politics seem to fail us endlessly. Policing seems to fail us endlessly, and lots of other things. But if we teach them and if we learn from them, maybe students are the way. And so that's taking me around the world, working with amazing schools in other countries and across most of the United States. And it all comes from me kind of having this pull to do work for the people that I come from. I grew up in Southern California, but I did not grow up around surfboards and beaches. I grew up in a very, very poor community. It's the poorest community in the state of California, actually. And the work I've been doing my whole life is really for them. And so I've done some of the same work that Andrew talked about with Blue Dot, working with schools around the country and around the world. And recently I've accepted a position, and I'm the director of professional learning and the director of curriculum for a local school district, where I really get to kind of really find out if the things that we have been talking about for 20 years, if they can work, and if they can work to a scale in public school systems that are very, very, very underserved historically. And so that's what I've been working on. We'll find out. We'll find out how well it goes.
Wow. Thank you, Mike. Sarah, passing the floor to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be on this call and meet you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So my name is Sarah Strong. I have gotten to work at High Tech High for 16 years, so similar story, similar start to Mike and Andrew. And I have taught both math standalone and then math science classes to 6th through 12th graders at High Tech High for the last now 16 years. And I've also gotten to work in our credentialing and master's program. So do a lot of training of pre-service teachers and master's candidates in our program, teaching classes around math and project-based learning environments and about lesson study as a tool for professional development and the fostering of more student-centered instructional practices. I still work at High Tech High. I didn't retire from there yet. I am currently a math instructional coach, and I also am the co-founder of an organization called Mathematical Wholeness, which is an organization focused on creating a math world, a mathematical world focused on creativity, sense-making, human flourishing, and the pursuit of equity and justice through the mathematical lens. We believe that traditional math systems have been oppressive and hierarchical, and that's not the intent or how mathematics even came to be. So we want to reclaim mathematics and use it for good. So we work with both individual clients who have experienced math trauma and schools and school systems who want to make transformation. So that's my other pursuit besides the High Tech High work, but it is all one part, all part of a big, a life pursuit of justice and equity. Thank you.
Wow, very inspiring, Sarah, really. Thank you. Andrea.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And the stories are so inspiring. We don't know what to say now, right? So, yeah, so I am Andrea. I've been working with education. I'm from Brazil. I am in Brazil. And I've been working with education in Brazil for the past 20 or something years. And for the last 5 years, I've been working with American institutions that want to bring their curriculum to Brazil. And right now I am the local director of Academica International Studies, which is an institution that is part of a bigger family that's called Academica, that has digital education and also brick and mortar schools, like and we bring the American curriculum to students who are wondering about international curriculum, so that they can take two curriculums at the same time and then decide later on in their lives, like where they are going to be, what they are going to study when they are older. So we're trying to raise this, like open their eyes to new information, but also let them know that their countries are important for them, and you could add new information and new experiences, but you can stay in your country and also add a new, let's say, story to tell, and also open your eyes to opportunities and maybe in higher education go abroad. So, and we also partner with Red Balloon, which is the institution that Carol represents right here. So,
thank you. Listening to you all, and I had the chance to talk for a while with Pasi and exchange ideas. I believe it's a common ground for us teachers. We are all educators here, right? Bring this sense of equity. I always say that I do believe that by broaden our scope, by opening windows to the world. I'm lacking of words in English now, but I believe you understand. We are kind of placing learning in a more democratic way, manner, which is what you are bringing as equity. How do we do that? And it's something, it plays a huge role in my life, and I had the opportunity to really talk to Pasi and Andrea, and they come from these grounds as well. How do we connect students now even if they are 4 years old, with the world that we have, that we are living, and playing a critical role in our lives. So, and by listening to you all, we become teachers, and we have this dream. And I'm not trying to be naive here, because we are all trying to earn our lives, right? We are saying how do we get to the end of the day? But this is something that by listening to you all, what strikes me is that what inspires us as educators is bringing this equity and looking at this kid and saying how can we make it better? How can we make, like Sarah saying about math? I struggled so much with math, Sarah. How do we make that make sense, right? Because probably what I faced in classroom didn't make sense at all to me, right? It didn't awaken anything in me. Like I was in the classroom trying to memorize that so I could pass the exam. And I just wanted to say that by listening to you all, I was very inspired, and it came to me that we tend to start our lives by as educators to say, how can we change the world? And I remember that I did my master's in Australia, and the dean turned to me one day and he said, "Why are you here?" And I said, and I was 24 at the time, and I said, "I want to change the world." And then he said, "Okay, oh dear, okay." okay, so let's just study, and you'll see how the cookie crumbles. But I still believe that we can change the world one student at a time, and by changing us. But anyways.
Absolutely, and really inspiring stories from all of our guests and participants today. And I think it's not just a dream. I think it really is something that we can do. And there are some examples, like, for example, I come from Finland, and just one generation before me, the country was really poor, one of the poorest countries in Europe. But then the country made a decision to focus in education. And now it's one of the richest countries in the world. And it's all thanks to education. My own family background, my mom comes from a house where there was no running water when she was growing up. There was no indoor toilet in the house. One generation later, I've been able to study 9 languages, went abroad to do my doctorate, and then I moved to another country, started my own company. None of that would have been possible if one generation before they hadn't focused on education and bring that quality and these possibilities. Staying a little bit on this issue of economic differences, I would like to ask, during these pandemic times, what were the big challenges and differences between the families and communities that are better off and not so well off? Was there clear differences how families and schools were able to cope? Maybe Mike, you could start.
Can you repeat that question really quick?
So was there big differences between school districts and families, how they were able to cope during the pandemic?
Yeah, one thing I drew a picture of this in my notebook maybe the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. Right when we went home, and it was in the US for the most part, we went home on Friday the 13th, which is a popular horror movie. So that was coincidental. But I drew this picture in my notebook, and it was of like an urban environment, a bunch of tall buildings and a bunch of students, little stick figures. I'm not very good at sketching. Andrew's an amazing sketch artist. He's crazy. But I drew this picture, and it had a bunch of arrows, and it was like, the students are going to be in their neighborhood, and they're going to be in their neighborhoods like they have never been ever before. Ever since we invented public schooling, where students could be taken to this other place. And I had this question that I wrote down, and it's still on my desk, I think, at my house. And it just said, like, will we learn something? Like, will we learn something during this time, as students are going to be learning in their neighborhoods and in their homes like they have never learned before? And beautiful things came out of it, right? Students learning family recipes and the culture of a home, and the stories about family that maybe they only got bits and pieces of, but now we're sitting together for longer periods of time. And it got worse because some students didn't have those supportive homes where the kind of discourse and rhetoric were happening, and home is not a safe place. Much less an intellectually stimulating and cognitively developing kind of place. So I think there's like, your question, the first word that came to my mind was the dichotomy that happened, right? For some students that were in a good spot, things maybe got even better. And for students who are not in a good spot, for students who have family difficulties, neighborhoods that are not safe, struggling with all kinds of different forms of inequities, everything that we were experiencing, they just kind of got turned up, right? If it was a good thing, it was turned up, and if it was a bad thing, it was turned up. We know this economically. The richest people in the world, they got richer during the pandemic, right? The poor people in the world, they got poorer during the pandemic. And so I wonder about that, and I think we're just starting to see the remnants of what pedagogically has shifted in schools. How are school districts dealing with some of this? How are they making up for some of the problems that have emerged? The amount of money being spent in school districts right now is extraordinary, just completely extraordinary. And I'm a district leader, and the other side of this is we are seeing a very scary decline in our teacher population. Like we're desperate for teachers, and that in itself is something that, you know, I have big wonderings about.
Great. Carol, do you want to pick up on this?
Yeah, no, I was, when we look at what struck me by your talk now, Mike, is that what good came out and what we are facing now, how are teachers coming back to classrooms to teach face to face. How did families cope with the classroom in their homes? And I think this is quite easy to juggle, and really, because when you look at the perspective, when you put that in a perspective from people that they were so vulnerable, right? How they like in Brazil, we had not that much investment in education. We still don't. When we look at the budget, the government budget, education is falling, the investment. I'm not sure how the teacher numbers, like the willingness for people to teach is. I didn't see any numbers on that, but we had students going to school to ask for food because the only meal they had was at school. So this is it put us in a completely different perspective. I think one of the upsides of the pandemic is how we developed a culture of connecting to the student no matter how and no matter what. So the screen is just like, oh, okay, how are we going to limit the screen time? So we passed that, right? We're going to connect to a 4-year-old via the internet and via a screen. Yes, it's just a window to the student. So it doesn't matter if we're face to face. I'm not saying it's not, no matter what. We've managed to do that. We've managed as an institution, and I hear and I read that we've managed to do that. I remember the same Friday 13th, the first 2 weeks of March 2020, we were questioning how we're going to do that. Students are going to be home for a month. This is what we figured, like for a month, how we're going to do that? And we've managed to do that here in Brazil. The levels of COVID they're just start getting better, right? The vaccination now is reaching the population, the younger population. So students are going back to school today in São Paulo. The governor said that by Monday, all students will be back in school. So it lasted for nearly 2 years, and we did manage, and we've learned a lot. And some beliefs that we had regarding technology shift. So this is one point. I don't know if you feel different. If anyone would like to add something, please. I'm just sharing my thoughts on educational wise. We walked more miles that we would definitely in this period.
Great.
Because
Thanks,
we had
Carol. Is that the same experience for Andrew and Sarah, for example? The increased use of digital tools and things like this. Do you think that is here to stay, or are we going back to the old ways of teaching as soon as the schools are properly open?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. So the use of digital tools. I have a lot of thoughts about the use of digital tools. And I think it's connected to what Carol said and what Mike said. Insofar as technology is used as a connector and is human-centered and is a platform for discourse and sense-making, hooray. But I think that's strikingly different from the way that a lot of technology has been emerging, including a lot of personalized learning platforms that came up as like the sole way of providing instruction, if you want to call it that, to students during the pandemic. So they log into their little thing and it tells them what they know and what they don't know. And then they like learn a thing, which I would say that's not really what learning is. And then they like take a test and then it gives them a check mark that they learned it. And I think that's just an awful version of what learning is. And so if that is the way that technology is going to be used to like assess students and tell them on a list of competencies, what they can and can't do, and then try to insert those into their lives, then I think we're in trouble. But if, as you both mentioned, we can use it to connect and be really human-centered with folks that are outside of our geographic proximity, then it's a beautiful tool. And I hope that stays. And I hope a lot of the other non-human centered things go away. Or something. I don't know. Maybe there's nice people there, but I hope that those don't become central to what education is and what schools are. Maybe those have a piece in the world, but that's not what school is.
Agreed. Fully agreed. There is one point here, Andrea. You were working. I believe the institution that you're working now it has a really strong online. It's really online center, right? You have students that are only fully online. They don't go to a brick and mortar school, right? So Andrea, how do you feel about what Sarah just mentioned about like the use of technology to connect, to be human-centered and not to be like a disposal of knowledge, but which the very traditional school does, right? The very traditional school does that without the technological gadgets.
So at Academica, for the branch that is the international learning, so Academic International Studies, I think it's a bit from what is the good side that Sarah brought, is that you're connecting to students who are all around the world. So you have like more than 20 countries around the world studying the same content, let's say, and participating in the same debate and bringing their experiences together in a humanized experience through the internet and using technology. I think that, of course, there's a lot to learn and develop when we talk about assessment, when we talk about engaging teachers and students to use fully all this technology and, humanize the experience. But at Academica, we can do that well. Before the pandemic, it already existed. And maybe because we complement their curriculum. So it is like, it's, let's say the extra, maybe the extra hour activity, like what they do like as an extra activity to just enhance their experience, or, you know, enriching their experience. So it's not fully online. They're learning both in their physical, their brick and mortar schools in their countries, and bringing their knowledge to an international environment. So I think we are in trouble if we don't change our mindsets as teachers, and if we don't change the way we approach that, if we do not include everyone in the system, because that is something else. I'm talking about kids who go to 2 schools, not only 1, right? So I'm for sure talking about kids who have more access to education, right? But there are so many others who do not have that. So not only humanizing the experience of learning, but also I think that as educators, we should, you know, get to know how we can work with this equity that we are looking for, to really, you know, introduce that technology to everyone, to get everybody closer in the world, right? So to teach them there are different cultures, but we are all citizens of the same world, let's say. And when you just, you know, you don't have, when you are in the internet, you don't have any limits, right? So my dream is that we can keep what's good, we can change what's not that good yet, but, you know, keep going to improve and include as many people as we can.
And then here we have a key, an essential part of the whole story, which is the teacher, right? And then how,
for sure.
how do we embrace the teacher? How do we look at, you know, because we are talking about how difficult it was for families, for the students, the most vulnerable ones. There were some teachers that they were not used to logging in any portal, device, and they had to, using their own resources. Cristiana, I don't know how you felt that there, how you've managed to have your teachers on board. Did you feel that they were on board? How do we engage teachers?
I think that's a very important point, that now that in Brazil, the students are coming back to class, let me share a little bit about how it's been since the students have been back to class, because I strongly agree with what Mike summarized it really perfectly, that COVID, you know, just opened up the gaps that we had in the system. And, you know, it was there all the time, but it seemed like it became really evident once we were in this situation. And I think it made us question, you know, the role of education, the role of the school, the role of the family, you know, and it kind of intermingled, and the resources. So as students came back, we have, I think, to deal with issues of mental health a lot. The students, they were learning at home, but the school provides a safe place for them, not only for especially for those that have very few resources, but even for the students who were used to, they felt a lot not being with their classmates, their friends. So that's been wonderful since they've come back. It's been better, but at the same time, we are still under a lot of precautions. So the teachers are still under a lot of stress. So we have, for example, if one student, they've been organizing the students in cohorts, so that, you know, like if one student is positive, only 5 students go home instead of the whole class. So we've been having to think of a lot of logistics to try to minimize exposure. But we had the good thing that happened was that all our classrooms are now set up with a technology that as soon as a student goes home, he still can participate in class, because all the teacher has to do is turn on the camera. They had 1 year of experience teaching online. So it was a great opportunity to get everybody on board. on how to teach online and finding ways. And but now that everybody's back, so the public school systems here in Florida are not doing any more distance learning. If the student is quarantined, they just make up the work. We opted for keeping the distance learning option because it's not fair for the student to miss 10 days of school just because, you know, he was exposed or he got sick. So it's been a lot of pressure on the teachers. We're just finishing our quarter tomorrow. And they're saying, you know, I think the thing that's weighing heavily on them is trying to manage the live classroom with the student in the background and the camera and making sure they're included and their questions are answered. Then you have all the logistics of wiping everything down, putting the mask, putting the shield. You have the makeup work. So they're saying it's never ending, you know, so as the students come in, some come back, some go home, so you're going to have to deal with this. It hasn't finished yet. So I wanted just to make sure that the technology has been helping a lot. And, you know, the partnership between schools and families has increased. I think that was a great gain that we saw happening, that I think the families felt the teachers' pain a little bit as they had to teach their own kids. And we saw a lot of jokes about that. The teachers felt the families' pain. You know, it was very good for empathy towards each other's situation. So I think the families are very close in partnership with, you know, oh, thank you for taking my kid back and letting me go back to work, you know, and as we reopen, and we're having a lot of trouble getting teacher, you know, if teacher gets sick, we can't find subs. We're kind of pleading people, you know, just, you know, offer to sub to come in, because it's a situation that you're going to see as we have to really take care of the students, of the parents, and of the teachers, because they are still dealing with a lot of things. And but I think so that's the side that I just wanted to make aware, because that's our very practical experience that we're giving this support to the teachers. And we're trying to find ways in the curriculum, for example, what resources they can use to make their lives easier, for like automatic ratings and giving them reports. We have now analytics, we have all of the things that can help them. So I think I can see that they are, you know, more open to looking towards resources that will help manage all of this, all of these different aspects that they're going to have to deal with. And it really is our friend that the technology may take away some of these tasks from them so that they can concentrate on the human side of the relationship with their students and their families. Because we've been doing a lot of things recorded. So like we had a curriculum night. The teachers had to record, like we're recording here, you know, some teachers had never recorded before. So they had to have a lot of hand holding there. So it's just that we have to have this in view, that it is a very great opportunity, but we have to make sure that we give all the infrastructure and support and mental support that they need, because we're going through this together, and we are seeing people giving up, and that is something to look into.
Yeah, I find it curious. Thank you for that. I think was it Andrea or Mike who also mentioned that it's difficult to hire teachers, and I would like to dwell a little bit deeper in that. Maybe Andrea, you could tell from your perspective, how is the teacher as a profession seen in general in the US, or can you generalize? It's a big country as well. And what are some of the reasons why is it difficult to hire teachers?
I think the role of teacher, you know, we have a saying between us, like my close group of educators, where we say, you know, we need to reprofessionalize education in America, because we feel as if teachers are often questioned to a certain point where their expertise or their opinions or they're removed from the decision-making process. They're not giving the their abilities to kind of understand their students, understand what the needs are, understand, what they might be able to have the opportunity to make decisions for what might best serve their communities and their schools is oftentimes stripped away. And it doesn't mean that they might have the right decisions, but I think there should be a way for them to have a voice in that process. And I think that can be frustrating at times. I think one of the things this pandemic did, as was mentioned, I think we're all in the same place here. Everything that you guys were talking about, I just found myself nodding my head, like, yes, yes. And one of the things I think that, like, everything got exposed, right? And we were presented in this situation where we had a chance to start questioning all the assumptions we have about what kids need, and what they, and those phrases come up: kids must have, they need to, they have to, and you have parents that have opinions on that because they had their experience in school. You have kids that have a different opinion on that because they're living a different life than we lived. They're a different generation. They have access to different, sources of information and things like that. And so, there has to be a common ground where we have these discussions. And I feel like oftentimes those discussions, in a state where people are highly emotional, things are tense, there's all different kinds of situations people are dealing with, a lot of voices get drowned out. And I think that's troublesome for some teachers. And I think the prospect of going back to the status quo is scary for some, because now that we've already had all these questions and we'd have an opportunity to explore what these new ways of teaching can be, because that's what the pandemic did provide on a positive end of it. I think going back to something that, we've witnessed might not be the most effective way of doing things can be frustrating for some teachers. I also think that I think a lot of teachers realize that during this time that it was less about the dissemination of information and more about just connecting to people and understanding that it's the relationship between the adults and the kids. And, that's the thing that matters. Right. And, I think being able to take that and build on that and have the opportunity, because that's where we're at right now. We've had these moments where we've had these realizations. How do we build on that? I think not having those opportunities, going back into the systemic kind of top-down approach where there's, little opportunity for change, I think that can impact people. You can lose that, I think, notion that maybe you can change the world, and so I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it is, there was definitely a more of an awareness that there's a lot on teachers' plates, and in some cases, I think some teachers felt a little bit insulted by, some of the harsh criticisms that were thrown at them, even though they were trying their best, and so I think that might have been a challenge as well. I think taking this time, really gave everyone a moment to kind of like take a look at themselves and look at their situations in life. And some people might have realized this isn't for me, or maybe this is, I want to go in a different direction. And I think that's what we're faced with right now. So I think we've all had these realizations. We've all had this experience. How do we take these opportunities where we've been critical and we've had an opportunity to really kind of think of ways that we can change the way we're supporting and helping young folks grow? How do we move forward with that right now? And I think that's what we're faced with. I don't know if that answers the question of why teachers aren't going back, but I think part of the solution needs to be a way to give teachers an opportunity to have an influence on the direction that their classes proceed, and also be respected in their opinion in having that influence. So that reprofessionalization.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. And just bringing briefly my experience from Finland again. In Finland, the teacher as a profession is one of the most respected professions in the entire country. For example, it's more difficult to enter into a university to study pedagogy, to be a teacher, than it is to enter and study medicine or law or some of the other topics that around the world seem to be the most popular subjects to study. And why do people want to study to be a teacher in Finland? It's not because the salary is the highest. It is good and decent salary, but you could earn more by studying business, studying law, being a dentist, something like that. But they go into teaching because they feel that they are valued. The working conditions are good. They have a lot of autonomy. They can make a lot of those decisions that you were talking about. So I think those really play into the reason why in Finland people want to be teachers and why the profession is so highly respected. Carol?
See, but there is one point that Andrew brought, that teachers are removed from the decision-making process. I feel that, and this is what we're saying, like the ownership and feeling that you're connecting to me. This is what I said to Sarah, like, Matt, I wasn't connected to the classroom, and we're so like, how do we engage students? How can we have a student-centered process, right? So this, we are saying, we've been talking about that for decades. And then Pasi comes saying, like, it is more difficult in Finland for you to enter a teaching program than medicine and law. But then, really, do you feel that in the US, there is a way of making the teacher part of the decision process, so they feel heard and they feel like, there is a voice for you, and you own the pedagogical trail, right, of your teaching? I don't know to whom volunteers. I don't know who should
I have a dream. Sorry, Sarah, you look like you're ready to go. I don't want to jump in. My dream is that,
cut you off too, Andrew. I'm ready to go on that one.
All right, Mike has. All right, I'll be quick then. I'm not gonna talk too long. My dream is that, historically, teachers are siloed to schools and their classrooms and their districts, and I think one of the things that I really love about being a teacher, especially, the thing that has happened over this last, during the pandemic, is that I've been thrust into a position of being an adult learner. And I think being like in any field of practice, people they're developing, they're growing the practice together, and if teachers can participate in that, if we can experiment and connect with one another and network and build kind of like, a way to build off of one another and share best practices, I think that that would be an interesting way to empower teachers, to give them a position in the forefront of educational development.
So I have a dream goes to Mike now, or
Sure.
Sarah?
So that actually, Martin Luther King Jr. is a little interesting, because now we treat him as a hero and in a way a martyr in American history, but the government hated him and the government conspired to have him killed. And that's an interesting thing, because what I have heard in a lot of these kinds of conversations is we use words like thinking, progressing, designing, creating. We use these verbs that are very very artistic kinds of words. They're words about bringing something into existence or changing something that exists. And yet we put the entire system into a single box, or into very, very small boxes. And we say, yes, we want you to be creative, and we want you to think, and we want you to do things, but we want you to do it as an entire crazy huge unit, right? And so it's like trying to turn an aircraft carrier, right? Instead of just being small and nimble. And when we talk about reprofessionalizing teaching, or we talk about giving teachers ownership, or we talk about changing what students feel like and professionalizing the student role, right? And making students be creators and authors of their spaces. And we talk about like what we don't do that. And we don't talk about giving it back to the community either, right? I've been doing this really interesting experiment at my office. There is a thrift store right behind my office now. And a thrift store here is like, it's where people like take things they don't want and then they resell them, right? And so, it's filled with a lot of people who are coming from situations of some kind of poverty, right? Or people who are trying to find trendy thrift store clothes. But for the most part, it's people coming from some level of poverty. And I like to go in there and ask them for feedback on my ideas for that school district. What do you think about this? Do you have any kids in this district? Oh, you do. You have an 8th grader, and they're going to be coming up to 9th grade. That's one of our schools. I'm thinking about creating something like this in the school. I'm thinking about creating some courses that are kind of like this. Do you think your kids would like that? Would you have liked that when you grew up in this school district? We don't do that. Sarah used the word flourishing. That's a really wonderful word, and I know she's very genuine in her care about it. But when you say a thing like human creativity or human flourishing, how often are we actually taking it to the people and giving it to them to have and to keep? We don't do that. What we do is we say, well, we're going to check how well you fit into a system and a box that we have created. And we take away flourishing and identity and ownership from the people who actually own us. So it's like, yes, teachers, and I think we do it to everybody.
And please follow the government docs, right? Yes, go by the book. This is what we do. And then we tend to convince parents, this is the best, right? And the teacher training is also based on that. That's the best you should do. So just
and in our public school
follow
system,
the book.
Yeah, and in our public school system, we fight over the tax dollars that the students bring with them. Like we literally fight trying to convince parents, sign your kid up for that school or that school to try to get the tax dollars, which is totally insane. But I'm a socialist, so who knows?
Sarah.
The only thing I think I would add on to that is I've spent most of my career creating math classrooms that center discourse and like deep thinking and reasoning and elevate all the voices in the room and celebrate their ways of being and thinking about things. And the more I gain expertise in that with students, the more I think, why aren't, and work with teachers who are gaining expertise in this, I think this is how the world, we need more of this level of discourse and reasoning around the world. And so how are school leaders modeling that type of leadership in a teacher-centered way and bringing in students to like have a shared discourse and design time about what could be? How are district leaders and even statewide leaders or countrywide leaders listening frequently and being around students and teachers and creating space to not only listen, but like elevate, celebrate, and then like let these people run with ideas? I think there are ways of facilitating learning and creating that some teachers are really good at that like policymakers haven't yet mastered and principals haven't yet mastered. And we need to harness those skills. I heard this story that people in our Congress, they don't even eat lunch together, like the Democrats and the Republicans, they like have different lunchrooms. And my students, I was telling them about it and they're like, what? They should do randomized seating like we do. Like you got to talk to new people every day and get to know them. Because once you know people, you can't help but like start like wanting to learn more and getting to like solve problems together. It like humanizes the experience. And I think there's so much work in that space of the ways that the voices that matter most are centered and elevated. Mike taught me something once. He said he'll go and coach principals and district leaders, and he'll say, not principals as much, maybe district and state leaders, when's the last time you were around a high school student? And frequently is not for a while. So how is it that people are making big decisions about that age of kids? So go be in the school. Something High Tech High did actually was they put a lot of admin all in our buildings. The CEO is right in there. The CFO is right in there. Go be around the children. Makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Great point. I would be curious to know a little bit more about the system. How does it work, and especially the evaluation of students at all your schools, High Tech High, and also Cristiana's experience. During this Educa Week, we've heard from experiences where there's barely any evaluation of students until the 9th grade, and then there are other systems where there are many standardized tests at different levels of education. So how's it in your experience, student evaluation?
Well, I just started working at Spanish River Christian School. They have a very traditional academic curriculum. So they are very, that they do a lot of tests. So they will, it's very traditional, but they have now a lot of they're using very interesting tools like ESGI and STAR for reading. So it will give the students feedback and put them into groups, so they can work at levels. But they have the traditional quizzes and tests during the quarter. So they would have, so their assessment is like so many tests of science, so many of math, so many for elementary, and then in each subject matter, that's kind of how they make the grades. But for elementary, something that I think is interesting is that they also look at skills. So they don't have a grade in elementary. They have like E for I'm still learning the system, so sorry about that. But it's either satisfactory, non-satisfactory, or needs to, or so they don't put the kids into a certain category yet. But they do have a very extensive report card where they look at the skills and even how they are participating in class, how much they are working on different and their relationships, the social emotional learning. So that's I think it's very important to look at. In middle school they're more traditional; they don't have those skills yet. But yeah, I think it's something that's going to be part of my job, is to bring a little bit more of another view of how we can look at the whole student.
Motion detected at the front door.
Oh, sorry about that. Alexa's here's talking.
It wasn't me. Yeah, I've been thinking about this today. I wrote a tweet and deleted it, which is very rare for me because I don't care anymore. I'll go guns blazing and whatever. We had students in the district take the PSAT today. And one of my goals in my career is to kill the SAT. I think it's a boogeyman hiding in the closet that isn't real. And I think it's one of those bullshit things we do that actually hurts kids. And we do it because we do it. I've been thinking about the word standardized tests for a while, the word standardized. And that word is adjectival, like it describes the test as being a test that is standardized, but that's not actually what those tests do. They're really standardization tests. And it's a slippery slope from standardization to sterilization. And so what they are really meant to do is they are meant to standardize outcomes for students. And because of that, that means they're going to standardize the processes by which students get to those outcomes. And I have no interest in that at all. I have no interest in my own children being a part of that. I walked around campuses today. I'm in charge of what we learn and how we learn it in our district. And I walked around campus today apologizing to students. That's all I did today. I walked around and I apologized to high school students who I believe we were abusing by making them do this. Because the test only gives us this tiny, narrow look at things I don't actually care if they know how to do or not. And the apology came with, and I'm sorry that we aren't finding better ways to engage in meaningful dialogue and discourse with you, where you are able to share all the beautiful things about who you are in more interesting ways. I'm sorry that you are not known enough by your world, that you don't need these ranking and sorting mechanisms put in place that determine your future. I'm sorry that this is just going to mirror the social construct that you already came from, because the standardized tests, the SAT, whatever it is, they're all built around affluence and status anyway. They're just predictive. We can look at what we have in society and it's going to replicate the same thing on the other side, right? And so we have to do some of those things because we're totally required to. Sarah used to use a word that I've used I literally said the word to the chancellor of the New York Department of Education about 3 months ago. And that was, she says, they're stuportant, right? They're important because they keep the lights on in the school, but God, I almost said the F word. These tests are just stupid. Like by definition of the word stupid, they are. Andrew, you got to help me out here.
Yeah. Being an educator for a long time, especially in a school where they allowed us to kind of come up with our own assessment models, there's something beautiful about the natural learning process where an individual emerges into themselves through that process. And if you have something that's outside of that, that's giving them a separate value system for their own experiences, right? good for the kid who aligns with what that is, and usually that's the affluent kid, but it's not good for a majority of the kids, especially those historically marginalized, because the alignment and the convergence into what someone else has chosen as valuable in their own learning causes them to separate from who they are. So oftentimes those kids are left with a decision. Do I become this thing and leave behind, my community, my family, the people that I know, because none of the things that we value here I see as being valuable here, but this is the pathway for success. So I have to become this thing and I have to leave that. That's a terrible decision that a lot of kids are forced to make because of this system. And I don't think it honors the natural learning process where kids are allowed to take their experience into a learning environment and say, these are the things that I value. And this is what I think is significant in my experience. And I'm going to use this to become more and bring that into the discourse of this community of practice. Instead, we're saying, no, that stuff is not valuable. Let us tell you what's valuable. And we're going to judge and rank you and sort you based off of the level to which you fulfill that. And, I think when you see that and you see how it hurts kids, you can't unsee that. And that's problematic. And it sucks as an educator to see how that can hurt some kids. And I think, Mike, you're really tuned into that. Sarah, I've seen you've done a lot of great work with that as well. So, that's something I struggle with. How do you?
I want to hear, Sarah was about to say something. I got to hear it. I saw you on mute.
I have to go get my kid from basketball practice, but I can't help talking about it. So I was like, I'm gonna stay, even if he's crying over there. I think he'll be okay. He's 10. He's okay, right?
Yes.
So you were talking about systems and systems work, and I think it's hard to, when we talk about dismantling these standardized processes, the next question is often okay, but what do we build that will work? And so people start scrapping to build something new that better represents some great ideas, like Christiana mentioned, some skills and some habits and some practices, and those are really great. And I think always the folks with power and affluence are going to be in a power grab to dominate the new system that emerges. And so how do we design so let's think about systems that can work. I don't know the exact answer, but a lot of my work in student-centered assessment has been in as a math teacher, I like to think of concentric circles. So what are the concentric circles of assessment that are happening in your classroom with students at the center? First, what are the routines around self-assessment that you have students engaging in? Then one level out, what are the cycles of peer-to-peer assessment that students are engaging in? How are they building relationships with each other? Thus valuing what Andrew mentioned, lots of ways of knowing and being, not just one way. And then a shifting role of the teacher as assessor. How is the teacher using their role in the classroom to give feedback to students in a way that is asset-based and excited about the work they're producing, but still pushing them in their learning journey? And then there's more than that, than the students, the students, the peers, and the teacher. There's the school community. So how is the school community leveraged to give feedback to the students? How do the students put work on display in the school that gets celebrated? And then the most authentic is people outside of the school community that you've designed a project for. How do they come in and authentically share feedback on the students' work? Because the students are working on something that matters to them. Oh, there's food deserts going on. How do you bring in an organization that's working on it and have students share their ideas for where new food distribution spots could go and get feedback from that person? And those are the levels. And I know it might not feel like a system, but it's at least it is a system. It's a structure, and it places students at the most center of it and holds them and celebrates their brilliance.
Brilliant.
I'd just like to add that, along what you're saying, which is perfect. And I like the way you put it, Mike, the standardization going, I don't remember exactly the words that you used, but it was very good. But the thing is, and here's the big issue is, how can we, first accountability, how can we guarantee quality? Because ever since education was so widespread in the system, so big as ours and in Brazil as well, how can we create indicators of success? What does success look like? And I loved your system, Sarah. It could be an individualized, we have so many players and that we have to satisfy, in the different levels of education. So how do we show the parents that the students are doing well? How do we show all the stakeholders that are involved? How do we see that the teacher quality, and that they're reaching their goals and they can reach the students, and what does it look like? So that's the big challenge. And I don't like standardization either, because I think that we have so many different needs. So I like the and model. It's like, it's not rather than an or, it's like, we need maybe the traditional school would be a better fit for some types of students, maybe the more project-based learning for other types, so that's where my questioning is. I'm actually not helping any right now, but I'm just putting on the things that I have had to face, of like, how can we show the parents that their kids are succeeding here, and what does it look like? Because the parents came from a system that was very traditional. So to them, they think that this is what education should look like. So I remember that when I started doing this team curriculum, we had to educate the parents as to expectations as well. It's like, education, what is it really about? And what do you want to see in your kid, that he's really growing, because the world has changed and we're highly connected and there's a lot going on. So that's the challenge. I don't know, Mike, and Andrew, if you've thought about, how can we do something that is scalable at such a large level?
Cristiana, I think that there is one point here that you brought, and there is this pressure of us as educators. We are serving the family, and this is something that we all, how are we going to tell parents and families, right? Not parents, but families, the adult responsible for this kid, that this is working. I think we're trying to convince ourselves first, because we come from traditional backgrounds. And Andrea, maybe you could share a little bit how we in Brazil, we're very traditional. PBL, I had to go to high-tech high to understand how it works, really. And it was like mind-blowing. I had a 6-year-old kid explaining to me the project, and I was like, no, she's hired. Okay, where are the cameras? That was like amazing. But then there was one point, maybe Andrea, you could share with us how it was for you to explain a PBL process to like the whole, when you were implementing some, and I know some of the projects you were working on that, like for parents that were asking, but there are no tests. How will we know? Maybe you could share a little bit. How did you manage? Because you were the academic head of an institution that had PBL, that were working with a PBL approach.
How about saying I didn't manage it? No, just kidding. So I think that because parents came from a very traditional, not only because of Brazil, but especially here, came from a very traditional background of learning and system, and they knew that they would have to have a 70% to pass, and that's enough, right? So you're not focused on what you're learning or what you're going to do with your learning, but what your grade was and where you're getting after you get that grade, right? So when I worked with this PBL only approach, for parents to understand kids were learning, was very difficult. When are they taking the test? They're not taking a test. They don't need a test. I mean, we are agreeing about what we are researching. They are interviewing people. These are the stages of a project, and they have the outcome, and they are going to ask the community what they thought about it. But how come, teacher, you're not going to grade them? And they want to just say that, okay, let me see the test. I want to see if you're correcting my kid well. And we're like, okay, kids are learning to use what they learn, right? to do something with that learning. And it was very difficult. I think that so far we've gone like somewhere, but not where we should be. But one of the things that I think that we succeeded was when talking about assessment, agreeing with kids what the expectations were. No matter what was being done, having kids inside the process of deciding what is going to be graded or what is going to be relevant or what you are expecting. They should have the voice as well, right? So they learn how to be responsible. They learn how to have accountability and things like that. So when we integrated kids more in the process, they could tell their parents that you don't know, but I do. This is what I did. This is why I did it. And what it served for. So I think that one of the keys was to get kids there to have the voice from the beginning. Not only, receiving feedback or doing whatever we decided in groups or anything, but having it very clear what was expected, got them inside the process, and they, after all, were teaching parents on what was relevant or not, right? So that's the little success I had in the group.
Andrea, I really like what you said there. And I agree with you 100%. In my experience doing this work, PBL, alternate forms of assessment, including students in the dialogue about, what do we want to get out of this experience? What is valuable? There's, as Carol, you mentioned earlier, like ownership becomes a piece there. And once the kids have ownership of it, then it's something that they can speak about, they feel proud of, and there's an emotional engagement there because it's triggered on curiosity. And, it's not like a science class where like answer questions, teach kids how to ask questions. It's like, no, teach kids how to be curious, right? Questions get answers, curiosities get satisfied. There's an emotional component there. People at NASA don't just, when they land on the moon or something, they don't just go like, oh, that was good. They lose their minds. There's an emotional component here, right? And I think when kids are in the process of it, they have a stake in the outcome. They have ownership, then they can get up and they can speak and tell their story. As Mike mentioned earlier, it's not the beautiful thing we made in the project. And I know High Tech High puts all the beautiful work up around, but it's more about the story of the kid. And when they get up and speak it, you don't have to make a case to people that want to perpetuate the system that they've had, the adults, right? They've seen it and they can't unsee it. So they're disrupted by hearing this young person speak about their experience and how much they've grown. So how do we create those narratives? How would we give kids an opportunity to engage in discourse? How do we give them ownership? And those are, you guys just got me. I'm just kind of summarizing what you all already said. So,
I just got a hint that it's quite expensive, right? It's too expensive to give voice. I mean, when we say that it's for us as educators and what we're saying about the whole, I'm not saying that's not my conclusion. I don't find it expensive. I find it crucial for us to do that. But for the system itself, how much does it cost, right? Because when you have the other way around, an standardized test, a book that you just have to follow, how much investment do you have to do on teacher training? Which way is easier? And I know it's obvious, but this is how it hurts, right? This is what hurts. It's at the end of the day, they're like, okay, how many students can we fit in this classroom, and how fast can we train a teacher to get this system working? And this is Mike. I wish you could. Can you move from district to countries? Maybe you could come and serve us as well, because this is what we need. We do need. We need to question it, right? We need to question, because I find myself sometimes just, surfing the system, just going along, like, okay, let me see how we can make it work a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I think you have to forgive yourself for that thought, because it happens. And especially when you move into any position with authority or status or power of any sort, it's tricky, it's difficult. this was making me think, this is going to sound weird, but it was making me think of like Instagram models, like influencers. And there's this thing about when we're trying to justify something to parents. Andrew has heard me say this before. One of my tricks, and this goes back to being a first-year teacher that was like probably just terrified. One of my defensive things I would start doing is just overwhelm them with what they think they want. And I think Andrew tapped into this, saying like, when you create something so irrefutably beautiful, it's really hard to say anything against that narrative. And I'm thinking about the Instagram model thing because it's kind of like, you know, people want that image on that beautiful mountaintop that they see somebody else post on Instagram, right? And that person on that mountaintop is holding just the trendy water bottle, and they have the trendy shoes on, and they have the trendy fitness apparel on, right? And so people think, well, I need to get those yoga pants, and I need to get that kind of water bottle, and I need to buy those sunglasses so that I can have a picture on a mountaintop like that. And parents often, and the system kind of perpetuates the idea that we need that skill, and we need that grade in that thing, and we need that test score, and eventually we can get to the mountaintop. When really, we should just take kids to the top of a mountain, right? We should just take kids to the top of a mountain, and that's not easy. There's a complicated way of getting there, but what happens is you end up having a human-centered experience, which was learning. And that learning is messy and dynamic and different for everybody. And the picture at the end might not be exactly the same picture for every single person. But when, you know, how many people buy a bunch of fitness equipment, it just sits in their garage and they never use it again? That's what we do with standards and tests. We're piling up a bunch of shit in our garage that we're never going to use. We forget that we subscribe to that thing, and we've been paying for it every month, and we just forgot that we subscribe to it. Right? And districts do that. I just moved in this job. The first thing we did is we cut out like $50,000 in weird stuff that they'd been subscribing to for years that nobody uses. Right? Because it was a hot thing.
It becomes a cost too, Mike, because it's at the sacrifice of people's joy of learning, which is such a natural, amazing thing, right? You know,
absolutely.
We have about 5 minutes left. It's been absolutely fascinating talking with you, listening with your ideas. Carol, is there one more topic you would like to raise, or should we do like a final round of everybody saying some quick tips on how can we take the next steps to improve education in all of our countries? How would you like to finalize this, Carol?
Pasi, that's challenging. But I believe that the tonic of our talk here, it was pretty much centered on how do we develop the ownership of teachers, kids, and we as managers, right? We are all sitting as in a managing position of education. And I'm not going to ask for tips. I think I've learned a lot from you all. Maybe not a dream, but something that we are looking forward to happening with us educators and for education. Really, maybe something easy, maybe something that we see that will happen soon, and God made the light there for Mike, right? Someone just turned on the light for you, right, Mike? So maybe something that we do see that will come out of this pandemic year for sure, right? Okay, we will see that in the near future. Trends, maybe.
Who would like to start? Andrea?
I don't think I have the answer yet, but I had a dream in the beginning. I'm sorry, but that was one thing that I really think that we should keep as maybe, I don't know if that is a trend or not, but could keep going. It was as we navigated in such uncertain world, and every minute was so uncertain. It is still. We as educators learned how to be a little bit more flexible, or to complain less sometimes and find solutions. So I think that teachers could maybe try to keep to continue being like forever learners, and to know that we learn much more from kids and from the environment and from the community, and let that happen like naturally. It is okay. We don't have the answers, and that is the magic. That is the greatest thing, is that let's continue having the time to make the right question, teaching them to make questions, and to look forward to being a better world, right? So connected and in a community, a sense of community. So that's how I think, without frontiers. That's a dream I have, if I could make my communication conveyed.
Beautifully.
Well, I can just say quickly, I have a very practical goal for the near future, is to find time to allow the teachers to talk and build together, and just share and support each other. And because we want, there's so much going on. And my big dream is like, give them focused time that's scheduled for that, so that they can grow together and share ideas and exchange, because there's so much on their plate. Tasks will overtake them. So it's something that, if you look at, it's a very practical, if you look at the schedule, just make sure you make time to talk and build together.
Excellent, thank you. Andrew?
Okay, I'm not starting with I have a dream for anything, but I think kids are way more capable, especially in charge of their own learning, than we give them credit for. I think kids can engage in some of the most exciting work in the world. I think they can engage in some of the most challenging things that we face as a global society. And I think, if we set the conditions right to give them the opportunity to have that impact, then I think it becomes our responsibility to just get out of the way, and I think oftentimes we get in the way, and just support them and celebrate them and elevate them. And constantly not be afraid to be critical. So those are things that I think about a lot, and I think things will emerge from that. Kids will show us stuff. I think that, as Andrea said, that's the beauty of it. It's messy and it happens. So, I don't know if there's so much predictability in that model, but I think good things would happen.
Wonderful. And Mike, some final thoughts?
Yeah, my thought is for maybe leaders, and I think teachers are leaders. Some are definitely teacher leaders within their spaces, their schools, but also just education leaders, whether it's school headmasters or principals or district leaders, state leaders, government leaders. Try your very, very hardest not to lead from the position of fear. And whatever you do, never let the fear trickle down to your people. Never, ever pass it on to them, because it's really easy. It's really easy to say, oh, this is, and you just like diffuse it out to the others. It's not an easy thing to do, but I feel like it's one of the most important things that our education leaders really, really need to do if we are hoping to alter these oppressive systems that self-replicate. Someone has to stand, right? Somebody has to be the person who stands there and says, no more. I don't know how good I am at being one of those, but I try hard. And I have heard in your voices that you are all keepers of that light, for sure.
Wow, thank you very much. It's been absolutely wonderful taking part in this conversation, hearing from you, learning from you. So from myself, thank you very much for everybody who's taking part, people who are listening as well. And Carol, thank you so much for you. I leave the last word for you.
Thank you. I will keep those words with me. It was amazing. We didn't know where we were going here, and it has led us to places where I love being questioned, and you can rest assured that tomorrow I will wake up and I will lead a different day with my teams, really. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, good night, good morning. Yes. Bye. Thank you, Pasi. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Participar da Educa Week é expandir os horizontes e você pode ampliar ainda mais esta aprendizagem. Adquira os e-books da coleção Educa Week, que complementam os temas dos painéis. Parte da renda será destinada a bolsas do Educ para professores de escolas públicas. Entre no site do Educa Week e conheça a coleção toda. Lá você também pode garantir o seu certificado de participação. E mais uma grande novidade: a Educa Week preparou mais de 50 workshops voltados aos professores, aos gestores e para todos que se interessam por educação. Amplie horizontes e acelere sua carreira. Inscreva-se agora. Vagas limitadas. Bom, e ainda vale conhecer o espaço de troca de práticas e acompanhar o prêmio Destaque Educação, com propostas inspiradoras para suas aulas. Participe, vote. Tenha uma experiência completa na Educa Week. E-books, certificados, workshops, espaço de trocas de práticas e prêmio Destaque Educação. Você ajudando a transformar a educação no Brasil.